On February 24, 2022, the world watched in disbelief as Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Explosions rocked cities across Ukraine, marking the largest act of aggression in Europe since World War II. Despite warnings, few believed a major power would try to conquer its neighbor in the 21st century. Missiles struck Kyiv, tanks rolled across borders, and families fled as President Zelensky stood defiant in the capital. The invasion was not a sudden impulse but the result of years of history, resentment, and ambition. This conflict is about more than territory. It's a clash of visions, between a free Europe and a world where might makes right. The Kremlin's stated reasons, protecting Russian speakers, fighting Nazism, were dismissed as a thin veil for a larger agenda. To understand why Russian tanks crossed into Ukraine, we must examine the long, painful history binding these nations. Russia and Ukraine share roots in the medieval Kievan Rus, but their histories diverged sharply. For centuries, Ukraine was dominated by Moscow, its language and culture suppressed in favor of Russification. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, 92% of Ukrainians voted for independence, a moment Russia's leaders never fully accepted. Ukraine's path was messy but democratic, marked by the Orange Revolution and the Revolution of Dignity. Ukrainians consistently chose European values over Russian-style authoritarianism. This divergence created an ideological rift. A free, democratic Ukraine threatened Putin's regime by offering Russians a different model. For the Kremlin, Ukraine's independence was not just a geopolitical loss, but an existential threat. The idea of a democratic Ukraine on Russia's border was intolerable, a virus of freedom that could spread east. This fear would shape everything that followed. After independence, Ukraine tried to balance ties with Russia and the West. Many Ukrainians, especially the young, looked to Europe for opportunity and security. The Orange Revolution in 2004 saw Ukrainians reject a rigged, Kremlin-backed election, demanding a pro-Western future. Putin saw Western influence behind these uprisings, fearing the same could happen in Russia. The 2014 Revolution of Dignity was the breaking point. After the pro-Russian president abandoned an EU deal, massive protests erupted. The government fell, and a pro-Western leadership took charge, cementing Ukraine's European ambitions. For Putin, this was a red line crossed, a Western-backed coup on Russia's doorstep. The prospect of Ukraine joining the EU or NATO was framed as an existential threat to Russia. Whether real or exaggerated, this fear became the central justification for Russian aggression. Ukraine's westward drift was now a matter of war and peace. In 2014, as Ukraine's new government formed, Russia seized Crimea in a swift, covert operation. Unmarked Russian troops took over the peninsula, and a sham referendum led to annexation, violating international law and past treaties. Emboldened, Russia fueled a separatist war in eastern Ukraine's Donbas, supplying fighters and weapons while denying involvement. The conflict became a bloody stalemate, destabilizing Ukraine and blocking its Western integration. Over 14,000 lives were lost and millions displaced as the world's attention faded. For Putin, the 2014 invasion was a test of Ukraine's resolve and the West's commitment. The tepid international response convinced him he could act with impunity. The war in Donbas drained Ukraine and gave Moscow leverage. By 2022, this frozen conflict set the stage for a much larger assault. The lessons of 2014 directly informed the full-scale invasion. The world would soon see the consequences. When Russia invaded in 2022, Putin offered a set of justifications: NATO's expansion, protection of Russian speakers, denazification, and demilitarization of Ukraine. He claimed NATO threatened Russia's security and that Russian speakers in Ukraine faced persecution. The denazification claim was especially cynical given Ukraine's Jewish president. International observers found no evidence for these claims. Most saw them as a smokescreen for imperial ambitions. The real motives ran much deeper than the Kremlin admitted. Putin insisted NATO's expansion was an existential threat, but Ukraine's membership was nowhere near reality. Key NATO members opposed admitting Ukraine, and the alliance required unanimous consent. The imminent NATO threat simply didn't exist. Ironically, Russia's invasion pushed Finland and Sweden to join NATO, doubling Russia's border with the alliance. Putin's muted response to this contradicted his stated fears. The real issue was Ukraine's Western orientation, not NATO itself. The Kremlin used NATO as a pretext to mask its opposition to Ukrainian independence. At its core, the war was about denying Ukraine the right to choose its own future. If the official reasons don't hold up, what truly drove Putin? Experts point to imperial ambition, fear of democracy, and a desire to secure his legacy. Putin sees Ukraine as part of Russia's historical territory, not a real country. A democratic Ukraine threatens his regime by offering Russians an alternative. Economic interests, Ukraine's resources and Black Sea ports also played a role. But above all, Putin's personal vision of restoring Russia's greatness fueled the invasion. He wants to be remembered as the leader who rebuilt the Russian Empire. This toxic mix of history, fear, and ambition made war seem necessary to him. The invasion began with a massive assault from north, east, and south. Russia aimed for a quick decapitation strike on Kiev, expecting Ukraine to collapse. Instead, Ukrainians united in fierce resistance, soldiers and civilians alike. President Zelensky's refusal to flee became a symbol of defiance. Russian forces stalled outside Kyiv, suffering heavy losses. After a month, Russia retreated from the north in humiliation. Gains in the south and east came at a high cost. The plan for a swift victory was shattered. The war had become a long, bloody struggle. The world responded with swift condemnation and unprecedented sanctions on Russia. Western nations supplied Ukraine with advanced weapons and humanitarian aid, helping it survive and fight back. The invasion revitalized NATO, prompting Finland and Sweden to join and uniting the alliance. Russia became isolated, a pariah in the eyes of most democracies. The war's outcome will shape the global order for years to come. It's a test of whether borders can be changed by force or if sovereignty still matters. A Russian victory could embolden other authoritarian powers. A Ukrainian victory would affirm the right of nations to choose their own destiny. As of June 2025, the war remains the defining conflict of our time. Did you like the video? Hit the like button and subscribe.